Man, look at these fucking nerds. Can you believe that some people grew up with these motherfuckers and that they actually like them? Nah, but real talk though. Much like Final Fantasy VII and 10 before it, Final Fantasy XIII was the first Final Fantasy of a generation. And so, said people who grew up with that generation will have played it as their first and adore it per extension. I guess it kinda ties back to the age-old question of which Final Fantasy do I start with? Many Redditors have asked, many YouTubers have tried to answer. The Buns made a good video about this, Dark Pixel made a video about this. But to me, the answer has always been fairly simple. It's like this. The best games in the series are only seen as such because of how they innovated, and the worst games only because of how they deviated. But if you have no prior context on what shit was before either, then why would you care about how 7 made advances in video game storytelling or how 8 ruined everything because of in-game hacking tools? So it was only natural that the 13 Defense Squad would pop up sooner or later. I even predicted this as it seemed like a pretty obvious obnoxious cycle that most big long-running series seem to have. So really, I can only come to the logical conclusion that the series doesn't have a black sheep, and that the extent of an entry being one only lasts until the next game in the series is released. Final Fantasy XIII will continue to suck until Final Fantasy XV will suck in a completely different way. And then all of a sudden everyone will love 13. Though many smug boy gamer guy comments would beg to differ without actually relaying any arguments to properly back their shit, as you'd really only have to observe the zeitgeist to see where things are going, really. People asking for remaster collections of the trilogy on PS4, Reddit threads by younger people saying that they loved it and don't understand the hate it's been getting, and loads of post-15 commentary being all like, well, at least 13 was finished. I never really liked the game though, personally. Sure, I've dug parts of it, but so far every single time that I've picked it up, being 3 times over the years, I ended up getting frustrated halfway through. Last time I did this was back in 2014 when I made a video documenting the process, in which I came to the conclusion that the game state never changed, making shit rather repetitive, but also just a lot of waffling about how it didn't match up to what I wanted it to be based on my expectations set by the other games. Naturally, I did also give 13-2 when Lightning Returns a try and ended up loving one and liking the other. I've thought a fair bit about why that was, and I do plan to review both again at some point as well, but I think it was mostly due to how they both improved upon the 13 formula by making it more like the Final Fantasies prior. Which, yeah, that's just also kind of the thing, innit? Taking the 13 out of the 13 to make it more better according to those predisposed to dislikes at 13 anyway. So, that's gonna be my angle here. Actually trying to come at this motherfucker with an open mind, not comparing it to any other Final Fantasy game, simply going in. Jesus Christ. First things first, I feel like we have to factually establish what this game is, more or less, for context. So, the story follows a group of people who are all brought together for various reasons, leading them to a single place. Upon reaching this place, they get branded by a god, effectively making them enemies of the state, but also magic powers. These people are Snow, Hope, Fang, Lightning, Vanille, and Saz, and they do not get along. See, Hope hates Snow because he thinks that he's responsible for his mother's death. Lightning also hates Snow because she thinks that he's responsible for her sister's death. And Fang and Vanille feel bad because they think that they are responsible for Saz's son's death, of which Saz doesn't know. And Hope looks up to Lightning, but she don't want his business, as Saz feels responsible overall due to being way older, yet he's also kinda sick and tired of their hot-headed shit, while said hot-headed shit Snow feels roughly the same about the protecting thing, but then he also a bitch. All of which will be bickered, fought, and cried over throughout the entire game as revelations are made and pressures are raised due to them also being fugitives because of the whole enemies of the state thing. Oh, and that god brand gave them a special task too, only shit's vague as fuck, causing mass confusion and speculation as well, all coming down to the fact that you spent the entire game on the run. Doing so quite literally along a linear line, by the way. People often joke about it, but taking the very few treasure-driven deviations aside, the game is actually genuinely one big hallway, along which predetermined battles will be fought that utilize a type of automated battle system that works by way of paradigms and staggering, i.e. its two systems. The latter is a bar that fills up as you do damage, allowing you to chain critical hits when shit's full, until it depletes again. However, the easiness of it filling up depends on how high the percentages is beneath it, which you then raise by using various classes that you stuff into the former paradigms. These classes consist out of the Commando, aka the tank, specializing in hard-hitting attacks and keeping the stagger bar from depleting without it filling up much, the Ravager, aka the mage, thus doing weaker elemental-based attacks and big beefy AoEs, filling up that stagger bar proper but doing fuck all to fuck with the stagnation numbers, the Sentinel, a defensive class, taunting enemies so they will focus on them only to then guard, so say the medic can heal the other members, and finally, there's the Saboteur and the Synergist, who debuff enemies and buff your boys respectively. Now, as stated, you don't really pick one and stick one like a normal. Instead, you create various prefab configurations of these, like a Commando to keep the stagger stagnant, a Mage to raise bar, and a Sap to make said Mage more effective, in a paradigm, switching at the flick of a bean and the twist of a nipple when said nipple is in a pinch. The thing is that you don't really menu in this game. Or, I mean, you could menu right there after all, but these fights is fast and damages is big, requiring you to monitor and manage these bars, healing fast and retaliating swiftly, thus not giving you the time to sift through your abilities. The default option is therefore always auto battle, selecting the relevant attacks for whichever class you be at the time, leaving you to only shift paradigm. Essentially making things a lot more arcadey, or even kind of like a mobile game almost, instead of the menu digging number crunching as seen in RPGs typically. Though, that said, you can make your dude stronger by spending points you get from battles like a normal, but even then its skill tree systems is more like a visual representation of pre-planned natural growth rather than anything you actually get to customize yourself. Which, again, is in line with how the game is structured overall. There aren't really any towns or areas that don't have encounters, or really anything to make the distinction between what is a dungeon and what isn't. Well, outside of this one big field area where you do some side quests and shit, but other than that, you are pretty much on rails in a lot of ways.
That is how this game do.
Man, it has to be said, I fucking love this game's art style. Yeah, sure, maybe the stupidly high and technically still impressive today somehow visual fidelity came at the cost of a lot, but then it is also really crisp though. Plus, it's also actually colorful. Loads of games get praised for being it, but will still have that washed out, over-filtered, desaturated look about them, especially on the PS360 generation, but 13 says no. Bright amber crystal structures set the cool turquoisey skies physically pop right all over your face. These green cityscapes or whatever the fuck they are with the tree-like skyboxes are fucking frameable as fuck, and the snowy town with the clean lakes, crystalline particles glistening in the sunlight as the post-apocalyptic roads contrast against the snow wide enough to burn retinas is fucking breathtaking. There aren't enough hands in the world to count the amount of times I stopped to fuck the roses, except maybe in this grey garbage heap, but even then there's loads of interesting artifacts of wars gone by, making it slightly less miserable. What I like about it most of all, though, is how it keeps motifs of past Final Fantasy games alive, repurposing them in clever ways. Like how the tribal patterns as seen in 8 or 10 will still mark the floorboards in cities and the clothings of those within them, or how the god robots will echo mech designs from 6 and 10, or how the logo styles are consistently square-esque throughout. For a game often labeled as not being a true Final Fantasy game, it sure as fucking shit still looks like one. And I mean, they even use 10 seagull sound effects, so, who's the Final Fantasy now, motherfucker? In any case, I heavily fuck with this game's usage of shopping mall McStarbucks cyberpunk, Tetsuya Coke binging on National Geographic one night.
Oh yeah, fucking eat that hyena.
And these Vatican-esque motif. Shit's unique and worthy of praise for sure. Besides, it's thematically appropriate too. El Pope and his god buddies created this fake world because the real world too wild and dangerous, so while shit may be constructed from garbage looking weirdly artificial at times, with forests that look nothing like forests and even the weather being fake with this weird plasma sun and these rainmaker orbs, the cities will have a sense of heightened civilization about them. this isn't cyberpunky or dystopian. As I said, all cities look like one big Starbucks, coated in warm and welcoming corporate floorboards, friendly vending machines, and neon signs that for once don't have the aesthetic of a Bangkoking Hong Kong back alley. Wish I could explore it though. There's one town in this game where the battles will lay off and the hallways will end, and it's also the only place where the frame rate dips below 30. Kinda says a lot about why shit's so linear, doesn't it? And empty too. Most areas, including said city, will be largely evacuated upon arrival, or will have lore explaining why there ain't no one to talk to, which is still something that stuck out to me as a negative. Not in that crybaby gamer boy, it's not like Final Fantasy VII kind of way, but in a way that I shall explain in big detail right about now. Final Fantasy XIII is one abstract motherfucker. Cocoon is artificial, of course, and so most places will look like they are, but in a way that to me felt more confusing than it ever did intriguing. Yeah, that's because they don't contextualize anything. Like, seriously, is it a city? And why is the sky green? It's called Hanging Edge. Does that mean that it's this sparkly stuff hanging off of Cocoon? Or is it the green core? Are we on the inside? The name Cocoon would suggest as much, but then why is the sky there too? Are parts of it on the surface then? That would explain us emerging from the ground at one point, but then why doesn't it look lived on at all from afar? It's more like a drippy Mars than anything else. Why doesn't anyone say? Where's the friendly NPC archaeologist who can? Why doesn't the data log tell me more? It describes a prison of sorts, but it sure as shit don't look like no prison to me. Also, what's this place? It's a trading facility for monsters, yeah, but it's also a forest made out of mechanic bits? That's cool. Why is the road just floating though? Why does the data log describe it as being deliberately confusing, causing intruders to become hopelessly lost despite it being just a straight fucking line? A floating, contextless straight line, mind you, like one giant Bubsy 3D platform. And you have a mini-map too. Light beams that show you the way and lightning saying shit like,
We can use the lights as a guide to keep us moving in the right direction.
Only there is no wrong path. Which is fine, honestly. I don't mind the linearity at all. I take this over the Shin Megami Tensei tier labyrinths any day. It's just that when it is just an abstract hallway with no way to contextualize or interact with your surroundings, things begin to feel like one of those PS1 fighting game background bitmaps rather than any real place. Which is my thing. I don't entirely buy into this world. Not all areas, mind you. The snowy town of previous mention, for example, lets you examine loads of objects and even has a wee side quest where you look for parts to assemble a robo boy, making you feel like part of your surroundings, but still, you get very little context as to where these places are in relation to each other. At one point, for instance, the party boards a ship that came out of an owl merging with the Pope, which then crashed into this building. A building which sits in this city called Eden, which has itself been properly contextualized by being shown from below earlier as a type of floating city ship. Cool. Okay. But then, why is it that after a loading screen it is revealed that we're actually inside of a sewer subway station, underground? That is also a robot training facility, but then also a post-apocalyptic city with another flying road, though this time even more abstract. Is this inside of that building? Is this even on Eden still? Or is it inside of Cocoon's core again? Or on the planet below Cocoon? Where you don't go by flying down, by the way, but through entering a portal. How does that work? Is the portal the atmosphere, kind of? I just don't know. The info is out there, absolutely, but the fact that I don't know it just from playing the game is a problem. You're always just kind of dropped into these places, pretty much. Teleported, time-lapsed, loading screened to another chunk of the gang far away as the party gets split up FF6 style, which is cool for reasons explained later, and any other technique that makes the adventure feel like a series of unrelated maps rather than a proper exploration of this freaky cool Cocoon world. There just isn't really anything that grounds the world per se. My disbelief was not successfully suspended for most of my time spent on Cocoon, which is why I'm asking all of those questions I just asked in the first place. Wouldn't have felt the need to do that otherwise, trust me. Now, granted, this stuff is easier to do when you're a kid, so if you played this growing up, you probably think that I'm talking out of my ass if you've managed to graph your own context and those based on later gate knowledge through fandoming onto it, making things click instantly on repeated visits, and that's cool. I ain't knocking that. I'm the same with Kingdom Hearts and Metal Gear. Shit just makes sense to me as I sponged it all up early on enough in my life to be able to do so, but I wouldn't play 13 until I was about 17 years old and spent most of my time doing so while being really fucking confused. And so, it became equally hard to shake those feelings now, even when I do obviously know what's going on. This is my 4th time going through it. I've read and watched a lot about the game. I get it, it's fine. But the reason that I brought it up was simply to highlight how 13 doesn't explain itself all too well. A lot of the in-world concepts and even entire story beats and characters exist in this sort of vacuum, aka the data log. Now, instead of anyone explaining this in-game, like say, while exploring a city and entering the whatever the name of this power source is research facility, where you get to chat to the researchers and get to see some of the other knickknacks on display that also use this power. You'd get the same information that you got from the data log for sure, but it also puts it into a context, gives it a place, makes it tangible, believable, real. Instead of it just being something that makes me want to ask more frustrated questions due to its abstract nature. I'm not crazy for thinking this, right? Because it seems to me like a storytelling 101 type of thing. Show, don't tell, stuff like that. Not that it doesn't show anything, obviously. I'll get to the loving bit later, putting my dick where my mouth is and the like, but even the story terminology gets thrown out like this. Saws will ask Lightning, "What's your angle?" And Lightning will say,
My angle. I'm after the Foul Sea.
The what? No explanation follows outside of the data log, which can be pretty darn confusing to a newcomer in and of itself.
A foul sea of pulse origin
A what and where?
was discovered within a vestige
A what?
on the outskirts of Bodom
Where?
2 days previously.
Not calling bull on these terms on their own, by the way. I like the lore, but what I mean is that at this point in the game, you do not have the context to know what these things be. Yet the game will still drop them on you either way. And yeah, sure, those terms will all have their own dialogue entries, but there's no saying when those will pop up, nor is it exactly the most brain-enticing way to do things. Again, show, don't tell. But in any case, once you do actually wrap your head around all of this, which shouldn't be impossible given how fucking big the game is, then you might begin to realize that shit really ain't all too bad.
Hello, it is I, Tariq, the Patreon Dolphin, here to tell you about Thor's Patreon only podcast. You can ask him questions, and he will give answers, a Q&A, essentially, and all that, for 1 money a unit. So spicy. So sexy. Love, Tariq.
I don't subscribe to the idea that when a character is flawed or initially unlikable that makes him bad. Especially when said flaws are things to overcome, propelling the main story further, which is surely the case here. Lightning is a grumpy bitch for sure, but that's because she's sick of everyone's shit, has a clear goal she wants to get to fast, never asks for any of this, and is also a lot more insecure than she's willing to let on. So that's also what she's written like. Dismissive and cutthroat around the cast initially, shy, awkward, and slightly emotional in flashbacks prior to shit going fuck. And she evolves through being saddled up with hope and refiguring out what her goals actually are, making her a lot more cheeky and protective in the latter half of the game. But no man, she's mean. She's just like Cloud. Anyway, the reason Hope and Light get saddled up together so they can grow as people by confronting each other is because you actually spent half of the game with the party spread about the place. This does give way to the disjointed vibes that I mentioned earlier, though I do dig the variety it brings in terms of visuals and playstyles with not every character having all jobs available to Paradigm. But it is a pretty cool plot direction as it gives all of them their own time to shine and flesh out. Like, they do not like each other early on. Absolutely not. because they only just met and are saddled up with being enemies of the state. So the first proper area sees them fighting a bunch, falling apart and going separate ways. Snow gets captured by the military where he's disciplined and made to follow orders, coming to terms with the fact that his drug dealer looking ass might not be the hero man he think it be. Light and Hope get souped up together due to Lightning managing to appear confident somehow, thus inspiring the boy to go with, hoping that one day he might be beefed up enough so that he can confront Snow about his mom dead. Maybe also slowly becoming a bit too stab happy, thus requiring Lightning to mom it up proper, slapping some sense into his ass. And Vanille and Sauce both end up together because they wish to ignore the bad and are making their way to a theme park thusly. However, remember, Vanille is also responsible for what happened to his son, which ends up bottlenecking the both of them into a harsh confrontation, owning up to their responsibilities. And yeah, all of this takes a dang while. Half of the game, like I said. Though this does mean that once they do all meet up again, they'll have grown considerably and will have a lot more reasons to stick together than most JRPG parties do. I mean, so often members will get accrued who only go along for a single purpose and then just kind of stick around afterwards for increasingly tenuous reasons like,
Oh, I'm invested now, I guess, lol.
but here they are all in the same boat and have come to terms with that in their own ways, ensuring that they can confront this boat head on. And I like that. Plus, you get to see Lightning sock Snow in the face multiple times, so, it's all good either way. I think I called this game a soap opera in my original review, and yeah, there's elements of that. While I love the OST, I despise the game's main theme, as it's just too damn corny for its own good. You get Drug Dealer and Twiggy over here crying and whining by the sunset, and then that fucking
Danger to us all.
comes on, and it just doesn't really do it for me. I'm sorry. Also, there can be quite some mood whiplash here and there, likely as a result of this. All drama be big, you see, so we can go from establishing confidence in one scene after a big breakdown, walk about a minute, watch another cutscene, and get dropped straight back into breakdown town with them not knowing what to do anymore and re-establishing the same shit all over again using the exact same self-justifications. And I get it, they needed to get a few big emos going leading up to the summon bosses, and they may or may not have fucked up the pacing a little, thus needing to sort that shit out before the halfway point, but it still sticks out as a bad thing, not gonna lie. Though, to be fair, it's not anywhere near as soapy as I remember it being, as that's kind of the thing with the cynical frame of mind, innit? I wanted to hate the game, so I latched onto those minor inconsistencies, passing them off as if the entire game is like that. Which couldn't be further from the truth, as by and large, shit's honestly pretty peppy. It's not about providing a cast for you to like, but about giving you at least one character that you can properly relate to given how fleshed out they are, and to view them as a lens to view this story through. Hence why they also always allow all of them to give their own opinions on current events, and for them to reconfigure their itinerary when necessary. The edgy will like Lightning, the normies will fuck with Saws, the angsty will relate to Hope, and no one likes Snow. It's a weird approach for sure, and one that absolutely has its downsides, but then I can't also help but appreciate it for how different it truly is. Since day one, the Final Fantasy series has always been about making the RPG cool and not nerdy, which is how someone like me ended up liking the series in the first place. I mean, I don't care about fucking D&D, math, medieval bullshit. The fuck do you think I am? But I did like Final Fantasy because it had fashion. Cool fonts, robot spiders, big explosions, pretty people, and fucking kaiju castles and pimp brothel shakedowns. It was cool. And the approach to gameplay has always been very similar. The first game sought to streamline and simplify what one might see in Ultima. The fourth sped shit up and made it less about strategy and more about thinking fast, reacting to bosses who could change forms mid-battle in real time. It was an action game, I guess, but just with menus. And roughly, they kept going down that path as they went forward. So now, as a result, I don't really value RPG battle systems first and foremost. I want the adventure, the story, the cool shit, and of course, I can appreciate a good system when I see it. But in theory, I should not be bothered by 13's automated Twitch-style switching combat, right? Well, I guess I'm not. I thought I was, because of the whole hating the game for what it wasn't and not looking at it for what it was thing, but really, I don't think the gameplay was ever what bothered me. It's a disjointed world, obviously. Really, while I do have some nitpicks relating mostly to how the game is paced that I will get into in a bit, I genuinely think that this is a fun system, simple though it may be. In a strange way, I feel like it both fixes and amplifies a lot of the issues people tend to have with JRPGs. All random battles start to feel the same. You just attack, and only the bosses require proper thought, right? Well, taking the train-based high-tension FF7 intro as a direct parallel, fighting these guards takes a hot minute or two and doesn't require shit from you. Whereas the guards in Final Fantasy XIII take mere seconds, and also don't require shit from you. Where shit does start being required though is with all of that staggering stuff that I explained earlier. On a base level, this can already be fun to fuck with, staggering large groups or big strong enemies as ASAP as possible, launching them up into the air and keeping them there is really cool, and there is also some legit tech to be found here too. Thing is that the act of paradigm shifting comes with this wee little animation that doesn't stop time, making you vulnerable for like a second, which in a game this fast can literally mean your death. So you need timing, shifting during an attack, on the final hit of a chain, letting you skip the animation as it lets lightning finish hers, and shifting the moment you stagger to coincide both messages, not wasting any time. It legit feels rewarding to set up vantageful conditions for yourself as quickly as possible too, by beefing up and debuffing bitches as you take note of how the stagger bar stagnates. Then you quickly shift on the end of lightning's chain, ravaging on the enemy big time, seeing as you lowered his elemental resistances as staggering him in a second, then cancelling your gauge to launch him up instantly and keeping him there for the remainder of the fight. And don't get me wrong, it's not a contextually satisfying system at all, but it is visually satisfying. Watching the sheer cacophony of particles and big shiny numbers as bars fill up and deplete in tow with sweeping camera pans, sexy animations, and really meaty sound effects can be an amazing fucking payoff for a set setting up, and it usually is. Usually, but not always, as they could have done more, sped up the bars, add shit like shifting conditions that reward mindful and quick play with shit like guard bonuses upon well-timed shifts, or like time trigger flips to coincide with lightning sword hits a la Final Fantasy VIII or Lost Odyssey that one can do while monitoring the bars passively, to name a few. And B, well, the game can be paced quite gruelingly if I'm honest. Encounters aren't random, which is great because fuck random encounters, and it also gives some form of life to the otherwise empty areas, but it is also not great as they have gone a little bit ham with the placements and a bit lean on the variety in which these can come per area. Fighting these robots who can only be beat by staggerage, making it really satisfying once you figure out the most effective way to do so, is cool. Doing it again but faster is also cool. Doing it 10 times afterwards with nothing much changing other than some other enemies being dropped in who generally add dick all, not cool. Every location has this issue, which wouldn't have even been all that bad if they weren't so fucking big. Seriously, some of these places make the fucking labyrinth dungeons from Final Fantasy 1 through 3 look like fucking 7's pre-rendered breezethroughs. The floating road forest, for example, takes 2 hours, with little to no downtime outside of the cutscenes and fuck all for distractions. It's really copy-pasty, not gonna lie. It's a single asset, aka the road, a panoramic background image, and these 2 or 3 flat areas that also all look the same. And for all of this, they have a total of 10 enemy types, which might sound like a decent amount until you realize that they're all recolors of enemies found in every other fucking location, and you won't really engage with them in a meaningfully unique way either, with a few exceptions here and there. Now, credit where it is due, I played the game in 4 to 5 hour chunks over the course of about a week and really only felt the burn near the end of each, so it's hardly a big deal, but it's a deal nonetheless. Especially when you get to the parts where they forgo the battle theme for whatever the area's music is, essentially forcing you to listen to the same song for 2 hours. It's not great. Though, all that said, do I like this game now? Yeah. I think what's important to me in a way is getting in touch with my first impressions more. Not that developing thoughts after the fact is bad, like, you kidding me? That's literally how I write my reviews. But what I'm saying is that first impression honeymoon vibes are often thrown by the wayside. Like, not a single motherfucker didn't enjoy Final Fantasy XV or Metal Gear Solid 5 pretty much all the way. They just got burnt by the final stretch, after which the zeitgeist took over, tainting their reflection with stark cynicism and gamer rage spewing from thousands of angry neckbeards on Reddit chan. Shit's gross, and I want fuck all to do with it. Yet, I still let that happen to me for 13. I was confused while playing it for the first time for sure, and I had my fair bit of annoyances, as I expressed them in this video too, but at least they're mine. Not all of the blind hate that got shoved down my dickhole over the years following. You can see this in my original review as well. I wasn't an angry boy by any means, but it's clear that I went into the video wanting to make the game look bad, kinda grasping at straws here and there and brushing aside the few things that I did like as fast as I could. But realistically, my time spent playing 13 wasn't all that bad. Not back then and not now either. Yes, this bit on the ship with the alarm fucking sucks ass. Yes, the story is far too confusingly told for its own good. And yes, maybe it is a bit too linear at times, but I can say similar things about some of my favorite games too. Metal Gear and Kingdom Hearts can be really confusing. Final Fantasy IX and Silent Hill 3 also have bits of gameplay that I dread upon revisits, and yet that's not what I remember when I think of these games. So it would be unfair to do that to 13, pretending that its flaws are all that it is. Critical equality, man. And don't get me wrong, you can just not like the game if you don't like it. It's hardly one of my favorites either, but at least consider if you truly felt that way while playing, or if it's something that you just kind of developed after the fact because of some angry gamer bro telling you. So, yeah, there you go. Fuck you. Spoonie can suck my dick.